All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Morgan H., and I'm a bookseller at Politics and Prose. And I'd like to welcome you all to PNP Live. A few housekeeping items to go over before we begin. First, I have dropped a link in the chat for where you can purchase the various titles from our amazing Red Press authors straight from PNP's website. They can be shipped, or you can come and pick them up at any of our 3 store locations for no additional cost. We're also at the beginning of our member sale where members receive 20% off most items in store and online from today through November 23rd. You can also ask our speakers a question by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can toward the end of the program. But we apologize in advance if we don't have a time to address your question. It is now my pleasure to introduce tonight's guest for our Literary Crushes panel with Red Hen Press. Amy Sharan is the author of the novels Mermaid of Brooklyn and How Far is the Ocean from Here? And most recently, her book Unseen City. Chelsea Catherine's book Summer of the Cicadas won the Quill Prose Award from Red Hen Press. Laura Ehrlich's story collection, Animal Wife, received Red Hen Press's Fiction Award. Melanie Conroy Goldman is the author of the novel Likely World. And last but not least, Rima Rajbanshi is the author of Sugar Smoke Song, which won the Women's Prose Prize. Our moderator for this evening is Allison Punch, a reader, writer, and Michigander living in the DC area. She was awarded the Deacon McCoben Young Writers Award in 2016 and reviews books on Instagram at Allison Reads DC.
Thank you, Morgan, so much for having us. I'm really excited to be here moderating this panel. Some of you, if you follow me on Instagram, may know this story, but my grandma actually emails me every single Politics and Prose newsletter as it comes out. And so it was a big honor of my life to be in a Politics and Prose newsletter this week. So thank you all. I'm really excited. These books are awesome. I've loved reading them. And it's really a pleasure to be here with all of these Red Hen Press authors. The topic of tonight is literary crushes. So we're gonna have a lot of fun, but we're gonna start out first with some readings and we're gonna go alphabetical. So Chelsea, if you would like to kick us off.
Sure. So I'm gonna read a section from the end of my book. And it's the main character is at an awards ceremony and she is coming into contact with her crush for the first time in about a month. I'm itching for a second glass of champagne when a voice comes from behind me. Well, look at you, rock star. I crane my neck, turn. Natasha stands there, Mark at her side. She's in a white dress too, but something more formal than Maggie. It tapers around her stomach, the fabric thick and smooth along her skin. Her hair curls tightly. She wears eyeliner. She never wears eyeliner. And then I spot the emerald and diamond encrusted rock on her ring finger. My heart drops. A rush of feeling floods through me, so strong I almost think I'm going to pass out. I put my hand on the table. Pain racks my body, but I force myself to smile. Hey there. I'm so glad you're here, Natasha says. I thought you might not show up. Shaking, I rise. It feels like someone has just shot me in the gut. Mason made me. I hold out my hand. How are you, Mark? There's a second where he pauses, staring at me, and I stare back, my hand extended. Then he reaches out and clasps my hand. I squeeze back as hard as I can. It feels like my eyes are watering when I pull away. Things are good, he says. How are they with you? I nod to Natasha's ring. Not as good as they are with you, apparently. Mark laughs. It happened a week ago. I'm a lucky guy. Heat branches out across my chest, no match for the air conditioning ruffling the lip of my blouse. I'm about to congratulate them when Maggie shows up with 2 more mimosas in hand. She gives me one, then turns to Mark and Natasha. Hi, she holds out her hand. I'm Maggie. She and Mark start talking about copy editing and working for local presses. I hold the drink to my chest. My eyes stay on Natasha. After a while, she turns and locks eyes with me. Her lips spread into a line and her eyes are glossy, probably from a mimosa or two. I wonder if her love for Mark is real or if she's doing this because that's what she thinks she's supposed to do. Because she's Natasha and she has this stubborn, committed outlook on what her life is going to be like, a picture in her head of the way things are destined to happen. I turn away from her just as the first speaker steps up to the microphone and asks everyone to find their seats. Maggie sits down and I take my place next to her. Natasha sits with Mark at the table in front of us, so I'm staring at the back of her head and her arms, free of fabric. I haven't seen her arms exposed in public like this since she was in college. I remember back then she was a bit pudgier, more childlike. Now she's full-on woman, this astute, snarky thing that no one dares to argue with. I stare at her curls, her back. She shifts, and then for a moment it feels like the whole world slows down. She turns around. Everyone else is still, staring face forward at the speaker. Natasha and I lock gazes. A moment passes. I want to tell her that it's okay, that she can let go. I'm not the same girl who cried every night over Lena. I'm not the girl who couldn't face a morning without a glass of whiskey. Natasha holds my gaze for another moment, then she tucks a curl of her hair behind her ear and turns away. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that was Summer of the Cicadas, really lovely, totally, I don't know what the word is, but it's like the desire is palpable in this book. So if you're interested in something like that, I definitely recommend it. And next we have Melanie.
Hi, thanks, Chelsea. That was totally amazing. I just love your book. I'm going to read from The Likely Worlds. It's in the middle. And I guess a question that I have for you folks is, am I cheating? Does this count as a crush? So it's, you'll see, but this is the narrator and the guy she's had nursed a feeling for a long time. But I don't know if this really counts or if I'm cheating. Okay. Paul has slept in my dorm room for 6 straight nights, though it seems wrong to measure time now in the same units as before his arrival. Nights with him pass like time borrowed from another physics. An hour lasts an afternoon, an evening, 6 minutes. We lie in the park, watching darkness thicken. We eat ice cream at breakfast time. We sit in my dorm room and it fills with smoke and the smoke dissipates. And then it is late afternoon and Paul is downtown at rehearsal. We are not even in the same universe as before. I have a secret I'm keeping from him. Christ, I can barely hold it inside my mouth. Paul appears at odd hours, swallows the world, then evaporates again. It is easy to lose track of things like Saturdays, like exams and the closing of the dorms. At Yankee Muffin, I am somewhere between probation and fired. I have been here forever, always listening to the dial tone, always waiting for Paul while he rehearses downtown. Each episode is without sequence or precedent. I decide I can't wait another second. I hang up and catch the downtown train. In the standard way of reckoning, 6 days has been long enough for me to establish myself as a presence at the St. Mark's Theater. I've made myself into something of a mascot. Today, I bring a tray of Yankee muffins, one of which I hand off to the girl at the ticket office as she waves me through to the 50-seat black box. Nadine, one of the actresses, is on stage, making her way through an impossible snowstorm. The other members of the company, Paul included, stay half-wreathed in shadow, moving in and out of the ambient light. We are not creatures who can winter over, says Nadine to Paul, to the empty chairs. We cannot hibernate or still ourselves. The hunger will persist even after everything else of us is gone. I work with artists at my internship, And one thing I've discovered about them is that they never provide complete explanations. A filmmaker can pitch you a 3-hour film in 30 seconds, but ask him what it means and he'll become incoherent or list the ideas of others. Fear, obviously, that someone will expose how little they understand themselves, that the questioning will unmask some sentimental platitude at the heart of their avant-garde work. You break them down, these experimental pieces, and there will be something like, things are more complicated than they appear on the surface, or it's important to be kind, or you can hurt people even when you have good intentions. Beauty is a burden. Beauty is necessary. Beauty is fickle. The play is saying something like that. And who cares about beauty, about cigarette smoking loveliness? I do. I look at Paul and I wish he were uglier. And I know I wouldn't have my secret if he were. Stop, says the director. Stop, stop, stop. Don't think about what your face is doing. It's cold. You're freezing, but you have no food. And you're in an ecstasy of starvation. When they break for dinner, I prepare to slip off. I have a paper to turn in. My internship is filming uptown, and the ADs just paged me. Besides, the experience of watching the play isn't mostly pleasant. The experience of being near Paul, the same. It's not easy. It's like an ecstasy of starvation. I make my face do regular as I turn onto St. Mark's Place. I think about what tattoo I would get. A pair of lips stitched closed, an organ bound in black twine, a full body image of Paul on my skin. Hello, New York. I pass the towering queens with their lady ankles and their football shoulders, the septum punks decked in needle punctures. New York, I have a secret. My secret is a word I can't say. New York, I'm done with myself. So what if he hates me? So what? Even if I repel him, disgust him, I would still slide over in my bed at night, just out of hope. I will still come sniffing around his feet, begging like a starved coyote. No matter what, no matter what, no matter what. I keep the conversation going in rhythm with the train's motion all the way uptown. Obviously, New York has heard this all before. To New York, I'm just a boring version of the same story. New York, it's true, isn't sorry for me, but still, New York understands. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So here's The Likely World. And that, I think, personally, I'm interested to see when we get into the discussion portion, but I heard a lot of longing there. So to me, that sounds like a crush. And next up, we have Lara.
Hi, Lara Ehrlich. This is Animal Wife, and I'll read the beginning of a short story called Beware the Undertoad. My grandmother made me strip my bathing suit on the doormat just inside her kitchen. Balancing stork-like, shedding sand, I struggled to free my ankle from the suit strap. The door opened behind me, my hands flew up, though I had nothing to cover yet, and then down. I couldn't hide all of myself at once. The neighbor boy was standing there, his eyes huge behind his glasses. Time stretched and slowed and stopped. I let him look. You were so fat, David would say a few summers later, grown out of his embarrassment. You had sand in your rolls. He would pinch my side. Maybe he was cruel. But the crueler he was, the more I prized his moments of tenderness, pocketing them like stones. At the start of each summer I spent at the sea, I found David by the flash of his hair in the sun. He never burned, except for the patch between his shoulder blades. I followed him over the rocks that form 3 spokes radiating out to sea, diminishing until they sank beneath the surface. When my grandmother was a girl, she and her friends had jumped from stone to stone until the boy she loved had cracked his head open. The water had danced away with his blood. David showed me how to smash a snail just hard enough to shatter its shell and keep its body intact. He cut a length of string for me, and though my fingers were slick with snail, I pulled the knot tight around it. Water sloshed in the crevices between the rocks. We lowered our snails until they struck the water, and he showed me how to tug the string to mimic the flutter of prey. Our heads tipped together. The sun warmed our necks. When the string began to vibrate, I drew up a blue crab with my snail clamped in its claws. Its exoskeleton glistened, reminding me of stars. That's a good one. David flipped the crab onto its back. It had the broad abdomen of a female and the red-tipped claws my Audubon guide called painted fingernails. Its Latin name, Calinectus sapidus, means savory, beautiful swimmer, I told David, and the females mate only once. We studied the crab together, tracing the contours of her underbelly. She clawed at us like she was drowning. The summer kids were a tribe. Holding hands in a chain, we raced down the beach and dropped to our knees in the sea foam, shrieking, "The undertoads got me!" The undertoad spit fizzed at our knees, speckled with bits of the fish and crabs and children he'd eaten. Look, there's a finger. Beware the undertoad that crouches between the shallows and the deeps, where the sand drops off below your feet. He's as big as a bull, and his greasy hide is puckered with warts. His milky eyes strain through the gloom. As he devours eels and lobsters and stingrays, his body balloons to twice its girth, quivering as he digests. His mouth is so wide the corners almost meet behind his head. He could swallow you whole. We dared each other to swim to the raft, but stopped where the sand slopes toward the deep. The undertoad waits for you to push away from the edge and tread suspended, kicking against the sea. Then he catches your ankle and drags you down through the dark and the cold. David collected sea glass in jam jars. Each shard was from a bottle that had smashed against the rocks and had been worn smooth by the sand and sea. The bottles once held secret messages, he said. Treasure maps and spy codes, and love letters, I said. We sat cross-legged on his crumpled sheets. Though the window was open, the curtains hung slack, and moths sailed in to orbit the bedside lamp. Our grandmothers were talking in the next room, their voices like waves. We still wore our bathing suits, and seawater had dried on our skin. If you licked your arm, I showed David, your lips puckered. I'll tell you a joke, he said. A little girl was walking home from school with her arms full of books when a man came up to her on the sidewalk. Those books look heavy, the man said. I'll carry them if you let me put my finger in your belly button. She let him carry her books. At the end of the street, the man said, now you owe me, and led her into the bushes. He set her books on the ground. Hey, she said, that's not my belly button. And he said, that's not my finger. I woke to my grandmother stroking my hair. I lay beside David under the sheets. Our legs were pressed together, sticky with salt and sweat. My bathing suit straps bit into my sunburned shoulders. My grandmother took my hand and led me outside down the path to her house, through the cattails that stood taller than our heads. She squeezed my hand and said, we won't tell your mother. It seemed I should be ashamed of something, but I didn't know what. The summer girls pressed around me on the rocks as I whispered into their flushed faces, my voice low and halting. A little girl was walking home from school with her arms full of books when a man came up to her on the sidewalk. What had the man done to the girl behind the bushes? We searched for clues in the punchline, but every word introduced another mystery. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. Yeah, round of applause. So this is the book. If you want to buy it, there's the link in the chat. And Amy said that she uses this story to teach crushes, so it's so applicable. And next up for the reading, we have Rima. You're muted.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to be reading from a story called BX Blues, A Dance Manual for Heartbreak. I'll read from the middle of the story, and it's a kind of combination of bits of flash fiction, which are the train stops. So it's a story about somebody riding the subway in New York, combined with a kind of mythopoetics, and then bits of a dance manual for how to do a particular dance called Hotria. And when I was looking for a story for this event, I realized that half the train stops were actually about crushes. Okay. Stop 8. Sudden halt. When you first fell in love with a stranger 10 years older than you're 16. The city's like that, seducing you in the seconds it takes to walk from that subway car to this one. A stroll, really, the way he eased into the rattling dark between cars, watching the city pass him by. A slump into the seat across you, thumbing through the ghetto murders and penthouse divorces of the Daily News, biceps shivering like tawny faces. Spelled right over the right orb in green curling script that read like Assamese was a Bengali woman's name, petite, sweet, Meena. The next 30 minutes, you imagined her drawing those strange lines for him before he etched them on himself, them walking skinny arm in sturdy arm to the neighborhood parlor, themselves the exhibit, his wearing that wife beater to display her claim to the world. You an artist? He asked, nodding at your open book, Indian art from the Mughals on. With one finger, he paused your turning and traced the dome of the Taj Mahal. You know a couple's buried there? The world's greatest love souvenir is a tomb. You didn't know that or know what to say, so you read aloud. Legend has it the emperor cut off the architect's hands. The masterpiece couldn't be repeated. Says a lot about power, the stranger said. Be careful, no one does that to you. Yeah, right, you said, and watch that arm swing into night, some Indian woman's name inscribed on it. The city's like that. In one night, you fall for someone else's man, you admire a dead woman's shrine, you memorize all the ways love makes art around you. Ay, que linda, you used to hear folks say, about things you never saw until now. Krishna. Krishna was a lover boy, player man, magician number one. First, there was the trick of his birth. He avoided getting killed by a king who'd locked his mother, the king's own sister, in jail. The gods had known and told the king that his nephew would one day kill and conquer him. In the village where he'd been whisked away to, he played so many tricks on the people, for the people, saving them from demons, even as he stole everyone's backyard cream, that he came to be called the child of Leela, a magic that exceeds words. As a young man, so dark and beautiful, he is always painted blue, playing the flute, a peacock's feather in his long hair. He stole every milkmaid's skirt and heart. You see why anyone grown up praying to him would have a player pattern? Why the real saving isn't how he did kill the king and free his mother, or abduct Rukmini, an Assamese princess, but not Radha, his married love, or counsel Arjun through war against his own brothers in the Mahabharata. These were heroics, less than the Leela of love, when he set up mirrors at midnight in the village fields so that he might be everywhere at once, so that every milkmaid would think she was his, but all the while he was with Radha, 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 the beloved he abandoned, but whom the people remember for the people as his greatest love of all. Dance Act 8. Stage shimmers red and blue, as if this were the gasping whirlpool of the heart. But rising along the back screen are silhouettes of trees, women, and those terribly vain, cruel, mesmerizing peacocks. You, Biju, are the heartbreaker god, with his flowering hands, his one leg suggestively crossed over his delicate ankle, that single blue and green eye of a feather locked in his hair. You, Maina, are Radha, dervishing about him, head cast up in ecstasy, pausing now and then by his side to clasp your palms to your heart, to blossom them in a whirl into a flute by your lips, the song you cannot help singing, you poor, wild, unlucky thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rima. That was incredible. This is Sugar Smoke Song. And I think, to me, what I'm really excited about to discuss with this book is that you have a lot of intensity of emotion within relationship that goes beyond sort of the traditional romantic relationships. There's a sibling relationship that's really intense. And I feel like I'm really excited to discuss. So thank you. And then finally, last but certainly not least for the reading, we have Amy. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much, Allison. Thanks for your expert hosting. And it's so fun to listen to all these amazing authors read. I'm such a fan of all of these books. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit from Unseen City. One of the main characters is a librarian who develops a really painful crush on a patron who starts coming into the library to research his haunted house. So I'm reading from about this far in. They've met once or twice, and then he comes back to the library. Ellis Williams was back. Meg looked up from the front desk, and there he was, opening the heavy glass double doors to the Brooklyn collection by pushing the handle, not pressing his palms flat on the glass and leaving greasy graffiti like many men did, the sort of men who spread their legs on the subway as if they were bowerbirds staking their claim with elaborate nests of pant leg, duffel bag, Sudoku pages. How men love to take up space. No, he gripped the stainless steel handles, paused to let the vacuum seal whoosh, and then pushed the rest of the way. And so she guessed that he was a standing up for women kind of subway rider. And having made this clever observation, she believed she knew all there was to know about him. There's like a New York City subway theme throughout a lot of our books, you guys. Even though it had been days, she knew him with a hypnopompic clarity, remembered his entire name immediately, endured a palpitation of joy. There was Ellis. He was different than other men somehow, and he was back. He was hers, for this moment anyway, wasn't he? For there he was in a heavier weight blazer now and a hand-knitted scarf. Who had made him that scarf? The weather had turned brisk with that abruptness autumn sometimes adopts, like a conversation icing over in the wake of a faux pas. As a rule, Meg developed a passion for anyone who came in asking about haunted houses, but this was different. There was the jolt of recognition, the moment of hope, falling in love for a minute with someone, like falling in love for a minute with someone at a party, simply because he has made eye contact with you and then looked quickly away. But more, even more than love, because in the end, one didn't actually want to be in love, not anymore. Love hadn't been able to explain anything since the days of Isabel Archer. No, Meg didn't want love. What she wanted was to understand something about the world, something about her own existence. Love couldn't help you there. Only death could. So Meg looked at Ellis, and Ellis looked at her, and the air between them burned like a firecracker fuse, and then they both looked away before impact, the way one didn't really do with a library patron. When one was a prim and proper librarian, one smiled crisply and said, if anything, you're back. How may I help you today? He rubbed adorably at his head, his gaze darting along the shelves. She took the opportunity to study him. He was tall, but not overly so, muscular in a way that had not particularly appealed to her until recently, which she was sure meant it was one of those hormonal things, wherein your aging body begins to panic about procreating and sends urgent messages to your not yet aged out loins to hurry up and mate with a hardy specimen of manhood. In fact, she was sure she'd read something like that in the Tuesday Science Times. There was something forbidding about him. Not quite open, and he was too broad-shouldered and unsmiling to seem friendly. But then there were those kittenish hazel eyes and unrealistically curly eyelashes and the strong jawline and cleft chin of every man she'd ever loved, and his cardigan sweater, and thick tortoiseshell glasses that lent him a vaguely bookish mien. Meg assembled her face in her tightest Dorothea Brooke smile and pushed her spectacles up her nose. Ellis smiled at being recognized. Hey, Meg, right? You were so helpful last week. I'm very glad. How goes the research? Okay, I'm kind of rushing a bit because I head back to Chicago soon. Meg's heart did not sink, because why should she care? She became very busy shuffling papers. Oh, so you're just here visiting? That's right. I assume there's been some sort of pizza comparison field test? Please stop being so stupid, Meg told her brain. Ellis smiled just slightly. Not exactly. It's complicated. Meg nodded. It is. Deep dish, pan, thin crust. He paused as if deciding whether to take the bait, then, right, to fold or not to fold. That is the question. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. So that is from Unseen City. The links to all of these books are in the chat. Really, really highly recommend them. I went alphabetical for the reading, but I feel like we really could have not have ended with a better sort of transition into our next topic, which is writing of crushes. So I really want this to be conversational, and I am going to put all of you on the hot seat, so you have to share with us your crushes. But first, I wanted to talk about writing crushes. So how does it differ from other, just your regular writing, and what do you enjoy about writing crushes? This is an open floor, so we're going to have an interactive discussion.
I can say I've been thinking about this a lot because I taught like a 2-hour seminar in a master class in writing crushes. Because I realized there's been a really central, like, painful crush in each of my novels. And something that I sort of pinpointed as like key and what sort of makes writing a crush really fun is that it's so much in a person's head or in a character's head. And there's always like some built-in tension because the person with the crush is never sure what the other person thinks or if it's all in their head or if it's totally true. And there's always like a weird fuzzy line. Like Melanie, I feel like you were sort of hinting at this when you were saying, well, I don't know if this thing I'm reading is about a crush or not. Like when is it a crush? When is it longing? When is it lust? When is it love? Like it's also, naughty that it just makes it really fun to write about. There's like built-in tension.
I love that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Melanie.
I was just going to say that the crush lives right next door to its darker neighbors, right? Like obsession and stalking. And I think that by its nature, although if some of you disagree with this, please step in. I think by its nature, the crush is delusional, right? It's like it's a overblown reaction to limited stimuli. You don't know the person, and yet you develop this kind of passion for them. So there's this kind of inherent unreliable situation, which I think makes it fun too. Go ahead, Laura. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I love that. And I totally agree with both of you. And I think Amy's point that a crush is all in your head is so apt. And the part I love about writing crushes is actually the physical side. So I love the fact that it's all in your head, but then your body responds to what's in your head. So you sweat when you're in front of your crush and you can't speak, and like, what does that feel like? So I really like to dig into the physical awkwardness of a crush and sometimes the grossness of it, like the sweat and the like like the tongue-tiedness, and particularly with teenagers, or preteens, particularly in my case, the wondering what acting on a crush would feel like, and the kind of grossness of that too, like bodies coming together. What would it feel like to kiss somebody or more when you have no experience in that area when you're 11, 12, 13? So I love the physical manifestation of that sort of mental obsession.
Yeah, I think I would add in terms of like form with writing a crush, what is like enjoyable about it and felt like kind of like a craft practice in a way is that there is something about the crush that suits flash fiction for me personally. So that's, I think, why it ended up being like half my train story was a story about crushes that one encountered on, different subway rides, had a different crush or different memory of an ex. And just because, I think this is why a lot of short stories writers thinking about like momentum of the short story narrative arc think about desire, right? Because the crush especially, I think, captures the kind of ways in which desire can be so surprising and unpredictable. And I love the wildness of that, like the wildness of some crushes that you don't expect to be crushes you have on certain people, right? Who just kind of walk into that subway door and then walk right out.
I love what you said about how it helps almost with plot. I think desire helps expand on tension, and I really like that. And I think when I'm writing crushes, I really like how the crush usually reflects something about the narrator in some way that wouldn't be revealed otherwise. And I just think it's a good kind of shadow to what the main character is going through most of the time.
Yeah, to Melanie's point, a crush is like you don't know that much about the person, right? So it's more about you. It says more about you, the crusher, than the person you're crushing on. Like why you're attracted to that person, whether it's something physical about them or something about their personality. And usually I feel like it's because it's something that you want for yourself. So maybe a quiet person is drawn to someone who's really sort of loud and outspoken. And that can say a lot about a character.
Yeah, that's such a good way to put it. And I feel like it's just like a good craft lesson for any writer, like Chelsea, to what you're saying, and Laura, like, every character has to want something. It's like the most basic rule of creating a story. Your character has to want something, even if it's only a glass of water. So it's like easy. You just make them want somebody who's slightly unattainable, and then it's like, boom, you have a story.
That is a good transition into the next thing that I want to pull out. So Rima, you mentioned sort of the unpredictability of them. And also, so in terms of plot, right? How do you determine whether your character is going to get what they want or whether they will be crushed?
Well, I'm going to say that by its nature, I don't think you can get what you want out of a crush. I think that it sometimes maybe something supplants that feeling and you realize there's a real person there, and almost as if by coincidence, they also happen to be someone that you.
Uh-oh, Melanie.
Uh-oh.
And so
Oh no.
crushy.
You're back.
Melanie, you cut out. Will you say
sorry.
what you did again?
Yeah,
Uh-oh.
I was just saying that I think that there's so much, so little about the person that there's no way it can really work out. It might be supplanted by your love for the real person as you come to know them, but you're so far away from them, and it's so much about the crusher as opposed to the crushee.
I love, oh, sorry, go ahead, Rima.
And just like echo the beginning of Melanie's response, which is that, which for me is why it's like a useful kind of craft exercise to write about a crush, especially through pieces of flash fiction, is that the narrative arc is already set, right? Like the crush is going to end with not successfully, right, for the most part. I mean, if it did, then we're in the territory of kind of more old school romantic novels, right? But I think I really enjoy like having that narrative arc set, and then what I can really focus on is the emotional complexity of what it feels like to have a crush, right? Which is it's bittersweet. There's a part to it where you already know it's going to be ephemeral, it's going to die out, but then there's also a kind of strange pleasure about that, right? And a kind of erotics to it that's different from other kinds of erotics that, to me, again, going back to why the train stop was a great form and analogy for that. I think there is a kind of erotics to encountering a stranger that captures your attention in the middle of a massive crowd, right?
I'm always interested in what happens if you do act on that crush and it will never probably be what you expected. So how is it different than what you've anticipated? And in part, and I'll get a little personal here, I'm interested in that because I never did act on a crush. So often in my stories, I'm kind of playing them out for myself of like, what would happen if that boy who I liked, if I actually told him I liked him or I tried to kiss him or something. And would the result then be disappointment? Would it feel fulfilling? Probably not, for various reasons. So how does the expectation align with the reality once that crush is acted upon?
I love that. And if no one else has more thoughts on this, I think it translates into my next question, which is the way that your personal life and your personal love life, especially around crushes, show up in your work. Now everyone's quiet. They don't want to share.
Okay, well, since I sort of kicked us off on this direction, I'll just share that the story I read at the beginning, and I actually checked the participant list to make sure that the person who it's like sort of based on isn't here, because that would be really, speaking to the next like question coming up later, embarrassing. But yes, so that was based on a real crush, although very, very changed, very altered by fiction. But that feeling of seeing a person infrequently, and how infrequently, so this character sees this boy summer after summer and not in between, how that infrequency of connection can help sustain a crush for a very long time, and build anticipation throughout the rest of the year, so that when you finally see that crush, it's like tinged with disappointment because the person is now different than you had imagined them, and rediscovery because now you have to sort of re-find that person or rediscover that person and your attraction to them. So I'm forgetting the question now. It was about how we use our personal lives in fiction. So yes, I definitely drew upon a crush that was that was formatted very in that way, where it was somebody I saw once a year at a very specific time. And definitely other crushes are woven in throughout Animal Wife, but that's the one that I think is a useful example for this conversation. I saw Amy unmute for a second, so I'm going to put her on the spot.
What? There's this, I was trying to remember what the, oh, I remembered. It's, if you guys read Jenny Offel's book, Department of Speculation, there's a great section in it that I think about a lot, where she's sort of like an unhappily married woman who's writing, and she says something like, I have great impulse control, so I don't act on things like crushes, and that's why I'm a writer. Which I thought was like really a compelling way to put it. And I believe at the time I took a picture of that and like put it on Instagram or something. I was like, wow, yes, this is why we're all writers, right? Because we've got impulse control. And my then husband did not appreciate that at all. But what can you do? But I think that I think one of the great things about being a writer is that you get to sort of make things happen in your writing that wouldn't happen in real life, or that you wouldn't, act on in real life. Yeah, in my second novel, there's like a Brooklyn mom who has a big crush on this, cute dad that she always sees in the neighborhood, and she acts on it, and they end up having this affair. And no, spoiler alert, the book came out like 1,000 years ago, but you should have all read it by now. No, but and I feel like I had so many conversations with mom friends who were like, okay, who was it? I was like, it's fiction. I don't know. But it's like, there's certain sort of just like, I don't know, things that everybody thinks about that you can work out in your fiction.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I don't think we should spread this around too much, but there's definitely the possibility of playing out something that, like Laura was saying, didn't actually happen in real life, or like Amy was saying, that you might have thought about, but it didn't play out. But there's also, there's just the feeling, right? So the feeling is something that we all have access to, that kind of like held passion. And you can apply that experience to someone fictional, I think, without much trouble. In fact, it might be easier to love fictional characters than real people sometimes.
Well, I think that's like the whole thing of the crush, like in the description for this event, which I don't even know who wrote it, but whoever wrote it's a genius. But there's something about like how every crush is a work of fiction, because it's like like we were saying before, it's usually somebody who you kind of don't know actually. And yeah, like Laura just wrote in the chat, the what might have been, and you never have to deal with the actual realities, the messy realities of an actual relationship, an actual person who, you're bound to disappoint each other in some way. But yeah, it's already a fiction, so.
I think just to kind of thinking about something that you said, Amy, in terms of kind of the line that we don't cross, that goes is part and parcel of the nature or experience of a crush. I think for me, because my book is very much about girlhood, it's the coming of age, story essentially over all these stories tied together. I was very much thinking through kind of the social terrain of desire, whether we want to call it, a crush or a relationship or an affair or whatever it is, right? And so I think that the messages I was thinking through, which I certainly experienced growing up, was these are the kind of routes of desire that are good. These are the routes of desire that are maybe more taboo. These are the routes of desire, perhaps, which I think my girl characters and my women characters are very interested in exploring, because that is sort of the nature of these characters in the book. Truly trying to find what's kind of more, in air quotes, authentic to them, right? And so I think there's something about that I was thinking through personally and semi-autobiographically in this, collection of stories / novel, in terms of how that gets expressed through the crush in particular, right? Maybe a kind of form of love that you're not brave enough to explore, or you're told you can't really, can't find fulfillment maybe in sort of the particular community you're in, right? Or maybe that you're being pushed towards, right? So all of that kind of was stuff that I was figuring out.
Yeah, I'll say this one thing real quick. But I think I wrote the love story that I did write because I didn't have examples of queer love stories when I was growing up. And so for me, it was almost like not even based on my life, but based on the stories I would want to read and the examples that I would want to see of like what not to do. Like, if you don't want to get your heart broken, don't fall for a straight girl. Like, I wanted more books like that. I needed more books like that growing up. So I'm kind of taking like my childhood and the things that I needed to hear about and needed to see and putting that into my writing.
Chelsea too. There's like this amazing, oh God, I was trying to do an interview with Chelsea and then I totally flaked, and I'm sorry, Chelsea, but we had like an early conversation about how I was like, there's this amazing central metaphor in this book, which is that it's like that, are they 17-year cicadas? Like there's cicadas that have, it's like the summer of the cicadas. And kind of early on in the book, people are talking about how it's like the cicadas have been like, like hiding, underground or wherever they hide. And then they just like they just like explode out and sort of take over, and they just want to like eat and mate. And I was like, oh my God, it's like this explosion of desire that's been, hidden. And Chelsea was like, all right, sure. But
I think, no, you hit it right on the head with that. With a lot of, especially with queer women that aren't out when they're younger or when they come out later, I was saying it's almost like going through puberty again. It's like all of a sudden, like all of this stuff is open to you and the desire and the emotion is so present. And I really wanted to cover that in a book, and I really wanted to use like my experience of going through that to kind of be reflected in the character. So
it worked. So good. Thanks.
And you nailed it. It definitely resonated with me. So thank you for writing it. I do want to do our rapid fire. So this is the hot seat. We're gonna do, I think we should do popcorn style. So after you say your response, you call on someone else. The first is your most embarrassing crush. And I'll break the ice. When I was 6, I was obsessed, deeply in love with Ash Ketchum. I can't explain it. He's a cartoon character, the guy from Pokemon. So that's mine. Ice is broken. And Amy, who's your most embarrassing crush?
Oh my God, I was not going to say this, but you just made me remember like I'm having like a recovered memory right now. And anyone who knows me will probably not be surprised by this, but I'm going to go ahead and say it was Mork from Mork and Mindy. I was like, he's an alien and no one really gets him. This is like my thing. And then I was just sent down like a horrible path of guys like that. Melanie.
Mine didn't age well. It's awkward. but I had a dreamy poster of Michael Jackson in a buttery yellow sweater, and I used to kiss it. But I think I do have a theory that prepubescent girls who are destined to be hetero often like men who look like women, because it's less threatening. So I liked a lot of like girly boys, and then that didn't grow up to be my taste. So anyway, MJ, that's fine.
Real quick, I know it's my turn again, but can we talk about Atreyu from the Neverending Story? Can we share experience for a minute? Okay.
Mhm, mhm.
Right, go ahead.
All right, I'm gonna tag you, Rima.
So I would say, like, I guess, like an embarrassing response to a crush that I had, and then I guess an embarrassing revelation about a crush. I had a crush at work. It was a really lovely older male colleague with a beautiful Irish accent. Thinking about what Laura said, and this very cliched kind of adoration of accents, but Laura was talking about the physical response to somebody you're crushing on, and I would just blush whenever he stopped by my cubicle. And but then, like, I think so, it was very apparent to him that I was crushing on him until he kind of gently let me know that he was happily paired off with his boyfriend, and so that's, I think, was kind of a small embarrassing moment. And then another kind of embarrassing response I had was a crush I had on a fellow poet who, I think had waved hi to me while I was biking by. So this is also like a transportation story. And then I, was excitedly said hello and fell off my bike as I like crashed, biked into the wall. But then, that didn't stop me. I got up right away, very excited to talk to this person. And so that's, I think, would be like two embarrassing moments. So the kind of comedy, I guess, of crushes too.
And who do you call on?
I think Laura's the next person I would call on.
Well, I love the segue that you just provided me. I wasn't going to share this, but I will. So I had a crush. So I did karate growing up, and I had a crush on a boy in my karate class, and we would often spar one another. That's like fighting with pads and things. And he was much taller than me, and he was very fast, and he would like sneak in and sweep my leg out from under me, and I would fall over. And this happened all the time, and he thought it was hilarious, and then he would like help me up, and we'd like laugh about it. But I would worry about that for like the following week and be like, oh my God, like he made me fall over, and I was like lying on the floor like in front of him. That's so embarrassing. So Rima, the physical comedy of crushes definitely resonates with me. As far as embarrassing crushes, I have a lot of them, but Melanie reminded me with her poster that I had a poster of Joey McIntyre from New Kids on the Block on my wall. And I was probably in 3rd or 4th grade, and when he started in the band, was probably, I think, 13. So it was a picture of a 13-year-old boy shirtless with baggy pants, and he had like his thumb hooked into his boxer shorts, and he was like standing there, and I used to also gaze at it as I fell asleep. Oh, and I would call on, did Chelsea Catherine already offer yours? Yeah, so I'll call on you.
So I realize now that I'm older, I liked so many villains when I was a kid because a lot of villains are queer coded. But in the movie Casper, Kathy Moriarty is like the bad guy in that movie, and I like literally had such a thing for her, and it's so embarrassing, and I don't know why. But yeah, that's my person.
And okay, so Devon Sawa in Casper, anybody remember him? Like when Casper turned into a real boy, and it was Devon Sawa, which is kind of weird because Casper was sort of like a goofy little kid, and then he turned into a hot, like 14-year-old. Which I can say because I was 13 at the time.
All right, so we are gonna have to be really rapid fire for the next one, guys. The next one is your writer crush, and I'll kick it back to you, Chelsea, since you went most recently.
I have two, so Roxane Gay and T. Kira Madden. I'll go to Melanie.
So Jessamine Ward would be my first. I'd go with Jessamine Ward. And Lara.
Let's see. I prepared a character crush and not an author crush. I'm going to go to Amy and then come back to me, Amy, when you're done.
I also was like, I don't really write or crush. I'm not sure. Does it have to be someone who's alive now?
No. Guess it really is a hot seat.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, you said quick. I'm just gonna say the other writers that are here with me today, I feel very like intimidated by, and I'm a big fan of them. And I've been looking at your faces all night, and you're all cute. So you're all my writer crush. That's not awkward. You guys are in good company. I already said Mork. So, Rima.
Well, I think I went ahead, thought about this question. I was thinking about stories or books about crushes and love that I crushed on, in terms of like the title of our event, Literary Crush. So I would say like one of my favorite novels about this kind of thing is Louise Erdrich's novel Love Medicine. And I think for the moment we're all in right now, thinking about what's the nature of desire and the impossibility or ephemerality of desire in quarantine and pandemic is Love in the Time of Cholera by Garcia Marquez. So I'll toss it back to Lara.
Yeah, so I guess I'll offer two really quick ones. At a writing conference, Karen Russell was one of the workshop leaders, was not my workshop leader. And so a bunch of us were fangirling over her, and we're standing in line behind her in the bathroom. And it was very exciting to like use the same, not the same stall, but like this, be in the same bathroom space as Karen Russell. And that's a very embarrassing thing to say, but it was very, one of those sort of like crush moments where you're like, oh, the person I really admire is also human and they're using the bathroom right before me. And then a literary crush I'll share, just because I feel like it formed the way I wrote for a very long time, was, and I brought it, I said I prepared, but I have a separate piece by John Knowles, Phineas from A Separate Piece, who was this like sort of elfin boy, I guess, who was perfect, and he wore like a tablecloth as a cape and got away with it somehow because he was just that cool, which in retrospect was probably not that cool, but at the time sounded really alluring to me. And I wanted to name, if I had a son, I wanted to name him Phineas, which my husband vetoed right away, and luckily we had a daughter, so we didn't have to have that battle. But Phineas was my, and always will be, my literary crush.
I love it. And I do have to give a shout out because I know there are people from Bookstagram here, and all of Bookstagram's author crush, Jason Reynolds, people's sexiest author alive, is hosting the National Book Awards tomorrow. So we will all be enjoying that. And I think I do also want you to touch on your literary character crush or literary crush, but we do have, I'm aware of time, and we have a question from the audience that I think can be sort of mash these answers together. So say what you would like. What authors or stories inspire all of you, those who write about crush, obsessions, and desire well? So that's a question from Lola. And Laura, why don't I kick it back to you to start?
I'm going to just echo Amy and say everyone here in this panel, I think, writes love and obsession and crushes really well. Yeah, that's the easy way out, but it's true, so I'm going to stick to it. Oh, should I pass it on to somebody? I'll pass it to Rima.
You know, I think actually for me, what inspires me the most actually tends to be kind of like cultural myths. I'm really interested in sort of figures of the divine feminine, just to kind of tie up, you know, sort of what the question's asking about with some of the themes that, you know, we were advertising for the event, and just the way, like, you know, poets like Sappho or Emily Dickinson or Scheherazade, right, like are writing about not just, you know, desire or improbable desire, but also the ways in which they have to generate desire in the reader, right, or the listener. So in a way, I think they're kind of creating a sort of crush relationship that may or may not become something longer. So I think there isn't one thing that inspires me, but I take inspiration from all these sort of women tellers from, across cultures and times. And I will toss the question to Chelsea.
The two that pop to mind right now are Ordinary Girls by Jakira Diaz, and it's a memoir. And the other one is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. And I'll pass it to Amy.
I got it. Unmute. Laura, I think, wrote Jane Austen, Master of the Crush. I think all of those, like Jane Austen and the Brontes, and God, I was just rereading for my crush class scenes from Edith Wharton's The Age of Innocence. I feel like all the, I don't know, for the longest time, a lot of novels, I think, were like powered by crushes, because there are all these people who, can't act on their desires. So there's just a lot of like tamped down, simmering longing driving so many of those classic novels in a way that's like, it's like so painful and so fun to read. And, of course and then they either get married or die in the end. So I feel like we've improved our crush story technology. But those are some of like the classics of writing that tamped down longing.
I love stories that end with just a kiss on the staircase. And like that was it.
Or like a look.
Or a look, yes. And that like plenty is to come, but you don't have to see like what, the reality of their relationship.
Or nothing's gonna come, but that they just both acknowledged like, yes. And it was like a really good look.
Like the end of the movie Speed, where like they kiss and that they're not right for each other, but it doesn't matter because that's all you need.
I do want to just also drop in, I think, one of the greatest films of all time for unrequited love, which I think could be categorized as like a drawn-out crush, which is Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love. I think that's a great kind of crush text.
Love it. Thank you. And Melanie, you have to, we have time. I do want to acknowledge the time if people are logging off. This will be live on YouTube, but you don't want to miss what's coming up next, which is Melanie, can you tell us about these cookies?
Oh yeah, okay. So first of all, you guys are lucky because some love filters include the water washed from the corpse of a leather worker or a deer heart. And I did not cook with either of those. I have a lot of water washed from the corpse of a leather worker hanging around, but I decided to go with making cookies instead. So I actually am really glad you brought this up, because I haven't had any of these and I've been gazing at them and also smelling them for like an hour. But these contain 3 different aphrodisiacs: chocolate, which is well known, honey, which isn't surprising, and then an English one, which is rosemary. So it's those 3 things together. If you want to cook with rosemary, basically you can just find any recipe for weed and like edibles, and just swap out rosemary for the weed. I don't know personally how that works because I live in New York. It's not legalized here, but that'll work. Anyway, so I just wanted to say that an aphrodisiac isn't like Viagra, right? It's not like we think, and we use that word as if it's meaning we're just to get you supercharged and fire your libido up. But an aphrodisiac is a mission. It's like once you eat the thing or taste the thing or drink the potion, you will have no rest until you consummate it in some way. I made these myself, so you guys can see how that's going to end. Anyway, I'm just going to have a bite. I put the recipe. I'm not a food blogger, guys. And I put the recipe in the chat if you guys want to check it out. You can see a picture of my dog who ate a stick of butter in the middle of it. Right there. Anyway, I'm going to try it and then I'll go to mute so whatever happens, you guys don't have to witness. Okay, thanks.
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much. This was a ton of fun. Thank you to those of you who have attended. Now is the time that we should all be supporting independent bookstores, supporting independent presses, supporting these amazing writers. I can't recommend these enough. As Morgan said at the beginning, if you're a Politics and Prose member, you can get a discount on them currently. And if you're not a member, what are you waiting for? So thank you so much to Red Hen Press, to our amazing writers. Melanie, I'm just watching you to see what happens as you as you fall under the spell. So it's really been a pleasure. Thank you all so much for joining us, and pick up these books.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much,
so much.
Allison.
Yeah, thank you. This was wonderful.